This is the CompuSports Radio Network.
Thank you, folks, for listening in here to Option Central here on OptionCentral.net. This is the Mesh Point Radio Show. I'm John Anderson. My guest today is from Austin, Texas. His name is Joey Lozano, not to be confused with the NASCAR driver Joey Logano. Mr. Lozano is a journalist publicist from the Austin, Texas area. Mr. Lozano had a relationship with Dr. James Smith down there in Texas. And for a number of years, Coach Smith was a proponent of the iBone, and we're going to get into a little bit of that. We're going to get into some of the principles and some of the rules and all that. Mr. Lozano, welcome to the Mesh Point.
Yes, thank you for having me on. It's great to be on the show.
Tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into the rest of the story here.
Well, like a lot of people who live in Texas, I'm a native, and I was born in Seguin, which is about 35 miles east of San Antonio. Went to high school in Seguin, got a journalism degree here from the University of Texas at Austin, and then had a couple of jobs in newspapers, including working for a couple of weeklies where I covered high school football. And most of my career I spent as a spokesman for the Texas Education Agency, which is the State Department of Education in Texas. I was Director of Public Information there, and then basically worked there for almost 14 years as a writer and spokesman for the agency. So my background is in journalism and public relations, media relations.
You decide one day you're going to the fitness center, and one day you come across a gentleman by the name of Dr. James Smith, where you two developed a relationship together, professional relationship. Tell us a little bit about that.
One day there was one issue of a local San Antonio magazine had done a special on fitness, the fitness industry and fitness centers, and had a picture of the fitness center I was working out at, and happened to have Dr. Smith's picture in that magazine. And I saw him the next day at the fitness center and just mentioned that to him, and he introduced himself, and we exchanged introductions, and then we would just kind of talk football, during football season whenever we were working out, and I just got to be friends with him there. And then one day in February of '84, between sets of bench presses there at the fitness center, he said, "You'll never guess who I was on the phone with today." And I said, "Who?" And he said, "Barry Switzer." And the first thing out of my mouth was, well, what happened? Was he down here on a recruiting trip and he bought 500 head of cattle from some rancher and they all had skin disease? And he said, "Oh, no." Basically, Jim said he had developed a multiple offense for college football, and that's what they were talking about. So he told me about that, and I thought it was pretty interesting, and because I was looking to try to do some freelance writing to kind of supplement my income, I asked him if he'd be willing to be interviewed about that, and that's the next day I interviewed him at the fitness center, and we sat down, and he told me all about how he had been a walk-on quarterback hopeful at Texas A&M back in the mid-'70s when Emory Ballard, who had invented the wishbone, was the head coach at A&M. And he said it was his job to run the wishbone against the first-team Aggie defense during the week leading up to the Aggies' Thanksgiving Day weekend game with the Longhorns. Texas A&M and University of Texas were major rivals in the Old Southwest Conference, and they played sometimes on Thanksgiving Day or over the Thanksgiving weekend. And both teams were running the wishbone then. And anyway, he told me that when he was running the wishbone against the first-team Aggie defense, he goes, "Man, every time I got to the corner, there was somebody there to take my head off whether I had the ball or not." And this was an Aggie defense that had guys like Robert Jackson and Ed Simonetti, Tank Marshall, Lester Hayes, and Pat Thomas, guys that would go on to play in the NFL. And so there were some major stars on that side of the ball. And he said after a few series of running the wishbone, with basically, trying to simulate the Texas wishbone in practice against the first-team Aggie defense, he said, "Boy, this offense is just too predictable. The defense knows where we're going every play, and they were there to stop it." And that's what they were able to do a few days later when they beat Texas 20-10, I believe. And it was after that game, or after that experience of running the wishbone in practice against the first-team Aggie defense, that Jim started to think with the X's and O's and said there's got to be a way, to run the triple option with less predictability and more versatility and more deception. So over the next couple of years, he kind of experimented with X's and O's, and that's when he came up with the I-bone formation. And when he looked at it, he said, well, a team could run the wishbone from here. They could run Houston Veer. They could run the option out of the power I formation. And the big thing for him was that if you had a talented running back in the wishbone, they would be limited to attacking only one side of the defense on the option or sweeps. But if you were to put that running back in a eye-bone formation where they were directly behind the center, 5.5 to 7 yards behind the center, then they could attack both sides of the defense from the option plays and sweeps, and he felt that that was a superior way to run the option. That way a team could take advantage of a talented tailback, and it wouldn't be limited to just attacking one side of the defense. So he told me about his conversation with Switzer, and that Switzer had said, okay, well, send it to me in X's and O's, and that's what he did. And then a few months later, he heard from Switzer that, they were going to go back to the wishbone. But I was so intrigued by what he had come up with when he showed it to me. I asked him, I said, have you got all these plays in your system in a manual somewhere? Have you got all this written down? And he goes, no, it's just all in my head. And I said, well, you need to develop this. You need to put all this down on paper. Let's get together and let's meet and try to see if we can develop this thing. And so over the next several months, I kind of helped him to basically develop it, at least put all the plays on paper. And then about that same time, there was an old company, Parker Publishing Company, was clearing out a lot of their football books, and they had an ad in Football Digest, which was a magazine I subscribed to, and so I ordered some of the books on the option. And basically over the next couple of years, he tried to research it and read the books and tried to figure out a way to present what Jim had come up with, basically put it together in a manual with the proper text and the blocking rules, because when I first got together with Jim and we tried to get a coach to adopt the eyeball, we wrote to some various college coaches, most of them in the Southwest Conference, coaches like Ken Hatfield at Arkansas and Grant Taft at Baylor and some other coaches. Can't remember them all now, but I think Bobby Cox at SMU was another one. Of course, they were all run their own systems, and they were the ones that said, the system that would need to be developed further needed to come up with rule blocking and various responsibilities for the players. So that's kind of what I did over the next several years. And I guess in about 1989, when the computer technology developed to the point where we found a company that had developed some of the first football diagramming software. I think the company was called Sprint Draw. That was the first software package that was specifically designed for diagramming football plays and saving them on a computer. And I basically bought a computer from a friend and bought the software and basically diagrammed all the plays and saved them on a computer and then put them together with text I developed from researching the various books on option football. And we had developed about a 110-page manual that we basically took to the local quick copy and had it reproduced there, and a ring bound and with a plastic ring binding, and then we marketed it to coaches via the old Prentice Hall Sports and Coaching Deck, which was a card pack of products for the coaching profession that was sent out to about 100,000 coaches nationwide. So that's kind of how basically we were able to develop the eyebone and try to get it out there to coaches and make coaches aware of it. And I kept trying to basically pitch the concept to publishers and never could get anyone to go with it until about 1996. Human Kinetics Publishers, which is a publisher of some football books for coaches, they initially were interested in it, actually had sent me a contract and were interested in publishing the book, so thought that we were finally going to get a legitimate publisher to publish the book, and it would increase the marketing ability or the marketability of the book, because it would be available to bookstores and the coaching profession. But then they decided that they didn't feel a book about a football offense that wasn't written by coaches, it wouldn't sell. It would be difficult to sell, and so they backed out of the deal. And I kind of gave up on it over the years, and from time to time I would try to pitch a publisher and ask them if they'd be interested in publishing the book, and finally was successful just actually fall of 2012. And I had been laid off a year before from my job at the Texas Education Agency because of budget cuts our state legislature made. So I had some time to develop a book proposal and send it to a couple of publishers, and one of them was Coach's Choice. And much to my surprise, they emailed me after they got the package and said, we'll review it and we'll let you know in about another month whether we think we'll publish or not. And then 2 weeks later, I got an email from them that said, we've reviewed this, and this is a book we'd like to publish, so here's what we'd like for you to do. And, of course, I was stunned because I fully expected them to do like the other publishers have done and said, no, we don't think we could market this. But they felt, the concept was legitimate, and they thought the manuscript was well done. And so basically that's when I, went to work, and it took, I guess, another couple of months to get the manuscript where they wanted it to be, and to remove all the diagrams and say those as separate files, and do all the work necessary to give them a production ready manuscript.
So all this went on really over a number of years, and then now you have a publisher who's willing to publish this. And when will that be available to the public?
It's actually available now. It was published the week of January the 6th. It was sold for the first time at the Coach's Choice exhibit booth at the American Football Coaches Association in Nashville, Tennessee. That's what they were targeting, and they were able to sell it for the first time there. And now it's up on the Coach's Choice website, and coaches can order it. I've been basically emailing various coaching associations and websites, trying to make them aware of the availability of the book, and also have written another article about the iBone that has been accepted for publication by the NFL's high school player development website, and they emailed me last week saying that they would probably be published on their website later this week. So they have a section of their website that has articles written by coaches. It's part of their kind of high school player development program.
Jerry Horowitz's organization, and Coach Horowitz was a past guest on Coach's Corner here a little over a year ago, where he talked about his Eagle defense he used up there in New York City. Mr. Lozano, you and I had an earlier conversation where we had talked about a number of teams who have used this offense. Nebraska comes to mind. It was part of a personnel package that they had during the Tom Osborne era. Usually speed option, sometimes blast option, load of some type here and there. Would line up in originally, run the flanker out of there, one side or the other, and leave an I formation. But I think most coaches who are our age anyway, and I don't want to say my age, some folks think that I'm older than Methuselah. Late 1980s, 1991, Bill McCartney at Colorado had coordinators like Gary Barnett and Jerry DiNardo having the iBone as their prime offense, and had players like Darian Hagan, Mike Pritchard, Eric Bieniemy, and more folks coming out of there. And they were running this to both sides, to the tight end side, to the split end side. Sometimes they'd move both ends out. Sometimes they would break the iBone down and go regular I formation. But predominantly during that year, especially 1990, 1991, they were an iBone team, and you could identify it fairly easily. How does that come in, and how they utilized their packages or utilized this offense as a package? How close is that to Dr. Smith's version?
Well, it's somewhat similar in terms of the triple option that Colorado and possibly Nebraska were running. Automation was pretty much identical to what Dr. Smith had come up with. He always noted any time he saw teams using the iBone formation that they were really not making full use of it. That adding the Houston veer component to that with the halfback as a dive back, particularly the ability to run the regular inside and outside Houston veer, that would really open up whole new possibilities for the offense. And he always felt like teams that were running the iBone, teams like Colorado and Nebraska, were kind of only scratching the surface, that they hadn't really examined the full potential of the offense. And the concept that Dr. Smith had come up with was for the iBone, the way he envisioned it and developed it, was to be able to run the triple option to the tailback to the right side of the formation, to be able to run a wishbone type option to the halfback to the split side or the weak side of the formation, and then also to be able to run inside and outside Houston veer out of that formation. So he felt like there was a whole lot more that the coaches could be doing out of that offense, and he felt like teams like Colorado and Nebraska, even though they were having success, he felt in particular Oklahoma, because of the speed and the athletic ability that their running backs had, that they could really be doing a lot more if they were to run the iBone the way he developed it versus what they were doing at that time. So he felt like there was just a whole lot more that coaches could get out of it if they would just kind of look at the possibilities and kind of expand their thinking a little bit. And so it was kind of interesting to contrast what the teams were doing versus what Dr. Smith felt was possible out of that formation.
Now, I know that we look at different option teams and different option flavors around the country. If you look at Paul Johnson's Georgia Tech package, the quarterback is the focus in this office. Most of the time, the fullback has to be a weapon, and then your wingbacks, you have to have the speed in order to turn the corner. In the wishbone, it was mostly a halfback dominated offense. You were trying to get them to the corner, you were trying to get them to turn the corner, and you were attacking with a fullback up inside. As I started going through the iBone package that Colorado used and did some research from my notes from years ago, and God, this goes back many years, the fullback really seems to be the focal point in this offense. Is that the same with Dr. Smith?
No, he felt that a fullback was important. He felt that this was very much, the iBone was kind of a tailback-oriented or a tailback-centered offense. That was his primary reasoning and philosophy behind it. He felt like that the primary advantage that the iBone offered over the wishbone and Houston veer is that it would allow a team to use a talented tailback to attack both sides of the defense, both the strong side and the weak side, on option plays and sweeps, and also that tailback would be a constant threat to run up the middle or off tackle. So I felt it was very much designed for a team to be able to take advantage of a talented tailback. And, initially that was one of the reasons Oklahoma had abandoned their wishbone when they got Marcus Dupree. They felt like, he was so talented that they needed to get him in the I formation so they could get to him more and get the ball to him on option plays and sweeps to attack both sides of the defense. In terms of what Dr. Smith envisioned, he very much saw the iBone as something that would enable a team to really maximize a talented tailback, whereas in the wishbone or veer, that running back would only be able to attack one side of the defense on the option, the triple option, the perimeter option, but in the iBone it could attack both sides of the defense, so that he felt it was very much a kind of a tailback-centered offense.
Joey Lozano is my guest. We're talking to him from Austin, Texas. We're going to get out here and pay a bill. We'll be right back with more Mesh Point. Got to go feed the goat, too. Back after this.
For over 10 years, Option Central has been the place where football coaches go to implement an option offense, to fine-tune an option attack, and to better understand and defend their opponent's explosive option-oriented offenses. OptionCentral.net, the premier site for all things option football. Started by a high school football coach to provide specialized resources geared specifically toward coaches of option football. Articles, videos, forums, podcasts, ebooks, available 24/7 from any computer with internet access. Ideas, insights, and coaching points from some of the most respected names in option football, including an extensive collection of material from coaches Jerry Campbell and Larry Beckish. Cost-effective, convenient, with membership plans to fit any budget. Ready to improve your option football coaching skills? It's time to join OptionCentral.net right now.
Mr. Anderson.
Joey Lozano is my guest. We're talking to him from Austin, Texas, and his racing career now with Penske Racing. Oh, wait a minute. That's Joey Logano. Dadgummit, I done it now. Joey Lozano from Austin, Texas. No, we've been talking iBone here on the Mesh Point. Mr. Lozano hails from Seguin, Texas. And, Coach, I'll tell you this story for the first time just as I'm telling everybody else. I was on my way out being transferred to Camp Pendleton, California in December of 1984. So we're driving through Texas, and we stop at the Holiday Inn off of the interstate in Seguin, Texas. I happened to get up late that morning. We had a long night. We got in probably after midnight. I get up, go down to get some coffee, and there's this buzz about a tornado that hit Seguin, Texas that night. And I was so gone to the world, I had no idea that a tornado had hit Texas, period, much less right down the road. And if for those of you folks who have been around for a while, you remember there was an old Milwaukee commercial that was done many years ago at a ranch in Seguin, Texas. Well, apparently that night a tornado came through and completely dismantled that ranch in Seguin, Texas. So obviously I went and finished my coffee. I packed up and left right then. We were gone from Seguin, Texas.
Yeah,
So,
and as I recall, there used to be a Motorola plant there in Seguin that was a big employer, and it was in the path of that tornado. It was heavily damaged as well, and it took out that plant and put it out of commission for, I think, a couple of months before they were able to rebuild it. So I wasn't living there at the time, but I remember hearing about it. That was probably only about 4 or 5 miles north of where my parents lived, because Seguin not a real big town. So we were lucky that it struck where it did. That's always devastating whenever something like that happens, and I'm just glad that my parents weren't in the path of that tornado when it hit.
well, obviously, I never returned to Seguin, Texas.
I can't blame you. Yeah.
All right, Coach, let's get ready to talk I-bone here. Let's set up our offense. What are our splits for our linemen here in this offense?
Well, usually the splits way to design them is that the guards basically align with a 2-foot split from the center. Then the tackles are split 3 feet from the guards. The tight end also usually splits 3 feet from the tackle. And then the split end would basically be anywhere from, I guess, depending on where the ball is aligned, could be anywhere from 10 to maybe 15 yards from the tackle, based on basically where his alignment, where the coach in the game plan is called for him to align. So that kind of covers, and those line splits are based on the line splits that the triple option teams basically were using at that time.
Now, most I-formation option teams, and you'll see this in a lot of teams that run zone blocking, they like to get their linemen up off the line back to the center's belt line. Were they aligning with that kind of depth as well?
Yes, as far as the offensive linemen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's basically how kind of they would be aligned in relation to the center.
Let's go ahead and talk backfield. We know the quarterback's back behind center. What about the depth of the 3 backs?
The fullback basically would be directly behind the quarterback, usually 3 yards out from the line of scrimmage, and then the halfback would be 4 yards, 4 to 4.5 yards from the line of scrimmage, lined up directly behind the right guard, and then the tailback would be about 7 yards from the line of scrimmage. Could be anywhere from 5.5 to 7 yards, but 7 yards is usually a good depth for the tailback to use to enable him to basically maintain the proper pitch relationship with the quarterback.
Now, I know a lot of teams like Nebraska and different teams who I'd seen try to use it or use it as maybe a gadget formation. They like to take the position that you were calling the halfback, or you could call it a second fullback or an H-back. I believe Colorado referred to it as an H-back. And maybe they even called it a halfback. It's hard to say. But they would kind of motion him from one side to the other real quick in order to try to gain or take advantage of maybe a numbers advantage that they might have had to the other side. Was that a feature of this offense as well?
Yes, and the way Dr. Smith developed the I-bone or envisioned it, that any one of the backs could go in motion to either side of the line of scrimmage, either as a receiver or a lead blocker or perimeter blocker, or even as a decoy to draw defense's attention, away from the attack side, the side of the defense that the offense would be attacking. Incorporating motion was a big part of the offense of the I-bone, the way that Dr. Smith designed it, and like I said, it would be multifunctional. It could the motion man could perform any one of several responsibilities there. And as you mentioned, sending the halfback in short motion would be also a way to get a man advantage, to the attack side, particularly if the defense inverted, or rotated the secondary to the strong side of the formation. If you sent the halfback in short motion back to the opposite side, you could outnumber the defense at the point of attack.
When you were talking about the split of the tight end off the tackle, was he using a split end at some point, or was he always using a split end, or was it something that he would flip back and forth from?
Yeah, it always used a split end. Dr. Smith felt it was important to have a split end all the time because the defense would need to account for the possibility that there could be a play-action pass thrown, and the split end could be, the primary receiver on a play. So split end was always part of the I-bone, and he felt it was important, not to limit the offense, but to always have both a tight end and a split end in the offense at all times, so that the defense would have to account for the presence of that player.
I'm trying to get into Dr. Smith's head here, and I'm going to have to do it through you, so I'm going to have to ask a number of questions in order to try to derive this information. So let me start it this way. When the quarterback came to the line of scrimmage, and I'm sure he's counting defenders from one side of the box to the other, was there a system in place for the quarterback to get his pre-snap reads and he would be able to make adjustments accordingly? Did he grant the quarterback that power, or was it in his mind to call them from the sideline?
Well, he felt it could work either way. He felt that in the game plan or prior to the game that the coach would have basically an idea of the defensive tendencies and how they would align to the, in respect to the eye-bone formation. But he felt that if the quarterback was capable of making those pre-snap reads and adjusting the play, that certainly that would be an option for the quarterback to do. It was never designed to let the offense or the coach in any way. And he felt that if the quarterback saw that there were more defenders aligned to one side of the line of scrimmage, that the quarterback should always have the option, to adjust the play that was called to be able to take advantage of man advantage that might exist, to the other side of the defense. So, he felt the quarterback being able to audible and change the play at the line of scrimmage based on his pre-snap reads was a feature that, definitely should be, part of the package.
Let's talk inside veer. We know we're using Houston veer principles. Let's talk rule blocking up front. Was this predominantly a zone blocking system? Were they area blocking? And I mean that by, instead of zone blocking as far as taking that fan step to one side and then reading and reacting to what the defense is doing, they were area blocking would be more angling over to cut off backside pursuit while you were executing the option to that particular called side.
Right. It was basically area blocking. That was the principles it was based on, as far as running the triple option, both from the eye bone or the Houston veer. Basically, we use area blocking so that your front side lineman would basically be blocking a man over or blocking down to the inside, on or off the line of scrimmage, to be able to, like you said, to cut off the backside pursuit and seal the defenders and try to basically eliminate defenders from the backside pursuing and disrupting the option. So it was definitely developed with the area blocking techniques as far as running the triple option. They felt that was, particularly with the defenses, which just seems to be getting faster and faster all the time. Dr. Smith felt it was important to use the area blocking philosophy to be able to cut off the backside defenders, because that's where a lot of times with most teams, were putting their best athletes on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, a lot of these kids can run like deer these days.
Mm-hmm.
Using area blocking principles, the quarterback's first read, I know just from my own experiences in any kind of option or seeing the option being coached, is that when you're using area blocking like that, you actually can get away with using a smaller offensive line because of the angle blocking that they're actually using.
Right, that's correct. That's a great thing about the area blocking and the triple option blocking concept, is you don't need a big overpowering lineman. Most coaches, in reading most coaching books and hearing coaches talk, they talk about how the most important aspect of an offensive line is explosion off the football and getting off the ball. And so that's one of the advantages of the area blocking, is that because of the angles that affords the offensive lineman, where they are able to block down to the inside and cut off the backside pursuit, the coach doesn't have to be concerned about having the big physically overpowering lineman, because the area blocking concept lends itself to a team that may not be physically gifted up front with big linemen.
Let's talk about the quarterback meshing with the fullback here. If we're talking inside veer, out of the I formation, which we all know that there's a path, there's a landmark, where is the fullback headed, and who is he reading to try to anticipate whether he's going to get the ball or not?
Well, in the Houston veer, out of the I-bone formation, the halfback is actually the dive back. In other words, the running back who is aligned between the fullback and the tailback and is aligned directly behind the guard is the dive back on the Houston veer. The quarterback, when he is reading, the quarterback and the dive back are basically reading the first defender who is aligned over the offensive tackle. So that's the first read. In the I-bone formation, the fullback, the back that is aligned directly behind the quarterback, He's a perimeter blocker on the Houston Beer option series. So the fullback and halfback in the I-bone formation have, have different responsibilities when they're running Houston Beer.
During the 70s and the early 80s, the predominant defense at the time was the 5-2, or what we know now as the 3-4. And almost everybody ran that defense or a variation of that defense. And this was one of the things that most offenses were geared around. And now we have seen this migration over to the 43, and some folks are using under, but most of them are predominantly over, shifting the defensive line to the inside or to the tight end side. When the quarterback is meshing with the fullback, he's looking at that defensive tackle who's over top of the end, who in this case, as we know nowadays, is a 4 technique. He may even be a 4-eye technique, being on the inside eye. How is the quarterback, where is his path after he's meshing with the ball? Is he taking it downhill? Is he coming straight down the line of scrimmage? I know there was a couple of different philosophical differences back then concerning running the option. Some would have him coming straight down the line of scrimmage and then cut back as he saw an alley, and some of them wanted him attacking more downhill with his angle. What was Dr. Smith's view?
Yeah, the quarterback's attack path, the way as Dr. Smith saw it on the Houston Bear, would be straight down the line of scrimmage. And moving to the second option key, the defensive end or a linebacker who was aligned over the tight end, and that would be where he would make the second read, the pitch or keep read, which would be the second phase of the triple option. But the quarterback, as Dr. Smith envisioned it in the Houston Bear, would be stepping, straight down the line, meshing with the fullback and making the keep or give read there, and then progressing to the next key. So he was always basically going straight down the line of scrimmage, the whole time. That was his path.
One of the things I can remember, and I had to go back to my research to look at this, and actually I didn't pick up upon it back then, but as I went back and started going through my research, Colorado under Bill McCartney, when they ran the option, whether it be the I-bone or the regular I formation, when they had removed the other halfback, when they went triple option to the tight end side, they always blocked the man over the tight end. They never allowed him to become part of the option phase. They would option the defensive tackle over top of the offensive tackle, or the 4 technique. If the dive play was taken away, the quarterback would pull, he'd disconnect, and he'd continue on. But they never optioned off of that linebacker / defensive end. They always took it to a secondary support player who had force responsibility. And if I understand this right in Dr. Smith's, the second phase of the option was actually that defensive end linebacker who was over top of the tight end. Am I correct in that?
That's correct. However, the possibility was always there. Blocking schemes can be adjusted to do it kind of like what you were referring to Colorado did. Some coaches call that the TED option, or for the tight end block. Some teams will use, like in the wishbone, will block that defensive end or defender aligned over the tight end with a halfback using a low block. There was always that possibility and that option for the coach to change up the blocking scheme. So optioning off the defensive end was always part of the I-bone, but certainly it could be adjusted if the coach felt like that defensive end that it might be better to block him and then make the second read off the force player. The possibility always exists for coach to change up the blocking schemes as he sees fit. But I think probably the reason Colorado was probably blocking that tight end was to prevent what they called the jet stunt by the defensive end. And sometimes they would coach that defensive end to jet or crash technique, where they would tell him, you go for the quarterback as soon as the ball is snapped, and in an attempt to try to force him to make a quick read or make a quick pitch that would result in a fumble. So certainly that's a possibility from the I-bone, is blocking that player and then making the second read at the next level.
I remember you had saying that Dr. Smith would get over there to the edge when he was playing quarterback, and next thing you know, somebody's hitting him right in the mouth whether he's got the ball or not. And that's pretty consistent with what defensive guys have been doing nowadays. And we look at this past Super Bowl with San Francisco and Baltimore was doing the same thing to Colin Kaepernick. He hands the ball off, hey, you go hit him in the mouth anyway. And there's a couple of times he was sent flying.
Yeah, I certainly, as an option enthusiast, really enjoyed watching the game that the 49ers had against Green Bay, and I really thought the 49ers could be doing more with that zone read. I guess, like you're saying, they maybe don't want Kaepernick to get hit that often, but it was interesting that Baltimore seemed to have, I guess, maybe a little bit more success. I know that Atlanta did the same thing, taking Kaepernick out of the play, but they couldn't stop Frank Gore and LaMichael James from scoring. And so I think what's really interesting about the 49er-Baltimore game is that I'm wondering now if, since Kaepernick took over so late in the season and the pistol package was added to the 49ers package so late in the season, if they will look to next year to open it up some, because if they were to run the pistol the way they ran it at Nevada, I mean, I think it would be really exciting to see the 49ers run that pistol option the way Chris Ault designed it at Nevada, where you'd have Kaepernick, making the first read as to whether to hand the ball off to Frank Gore, but be bringing LaMichael James in motion from the slot, and then you'd have that true triple option. They're only really running a double option out of that scheme, and I think they could be doing a lot more because LaMichael James has got so much speed. It would be really at least exciting for me to see the 49ers run the true triple out of the pistol formation and see if it could work. I think a lot of option coaches believe that the option can be run at the pro level if you coach it up right, that it's all in the coaching and all in the packaging and taking advantage of situations where the option can work and where the defense may not be looking for it.
During the course of this past season, I had a lot of people ask me, John, do you think the option will be able to continue at the NFL level? And I would look at them, and my answer was the same all through the season. It's just going to take one high-dollar quarterback who's going to be benched for a period of time because he got hit in the mouth and knocked out of his skull, or he's going to suffer some sort of injury where he's out for a long time. And ownership is saying, wait a minute, I'm not paying this guy these big bucks for high risk for injury offense, not necessarily high risk in the way it's executed, risk of high injury. For him to be sitting on the sideline when I'm paying him all this money, then do we have a guy behind him who can play it as well? Or are we going to handicap ourselves with this? So I really kind of saw this as sort of as a passing fad, and now that RG3 went down and he sustained the injury that he did, I'm sure he'll be back and better next year, and we wish him a speedy recovery. My hat's off to Colin Kaepernick because he played a whale of a season. This kid's going to be a tremendous talent. He was throwing the ball into places I never thought a second-year player was able to do, and I'm sure that offense is going to continue to develop. Out of an eye bone right now, let's say at the high school level, are there any high schools that have taken this offense and really continued on with it and continued to develop it at their level?
Not as far as we've been able to tell. After we sold our first manual back in the early 1990s, we didn't do much in terms of follow-up work. I basically was selling the manual from the kitchen table in my apartment, essentially running almost kind of like a little mail order business because I was handling, processing all the orders and mailing out all the manuals when the orders came in. So as far as I know, we never actually got to see a high school team running the iBone. Like I said, I do know the coach up in Keller, Texas, who says he's been running it with his team, that he's used it with his 9 and 10-year-old players, and that they also ran offense at Southwest Baptist State up in Missouri when he was a quarterback there. It's based on tried and true option principles, and so we think that it's certainly a solid concept that could work. There's still a lot of high school teams in the country that play good option football. I've seen some teams from Ohio and Oklahoma on some of the Fox Sports and some of the other sports channels, and seen some of the high school games. And I think there's even a couple of schools around the country that still run the option out of the true wishbone. They're still running the true wishbone formation. So it's not completely gone, hasn't completely disappeared off the scene, but I think it's an offense. The option concept, I think, can work really well at the high school level, where your level of talent of players in the cross positions is more equal, and you don't have the big size and speed disparities that you do once you get into the major college level.
Oh, I think the option, even the old Houston split-back veer is still in use because one of our local teams, Swain County High School over here in Bryson City, North Carolina, has been running the veer for a number of years. They have 10 state titles to their credit and went to the state title here this past year, and they lost in the last minutes of the game. But, yes, even the old Houston split-back veer is very highly used still by some teams.
Oh, yeah, and there's John Curtis High School over in Louisiana. They've been running the veer for decades. I think that they've been very successful with it as well. John Curtis and I think it's his name, John or James Curtis. He and his son, who's on his staff there. I know I've seen some articles by them in American Football Monthly, and they run the Houston Beer, and they've been running it for years, and it's been very successful for them. So it definitely can work. And kind of getting back to what you were saying earlier about at the NFL, I think that the one thing that, like you're saying, I think the offense the 49ers are running with Kaepernick will continue to develop things. I think a key to kind of avoiding the injury is coaches have traditionally taken quarterbacks that have great athletic ability, guys like Cam Newton. 20 years ago, somebody like Cam Newton, even with all the success he had, might have been converted to a tight end once he got in the NFL. And I think that's a big part of it. Once you see quarterbacks getting bigger and faster and stronger and more athletic, you see quarterbacks like Cam Newton, like Colin Kaepernick. You see coaches continuing to stick with those players at the quarterback position. Colin Kaepernick's as big as a tight end used to be many years ago. I think it's all in, and a lot of it will depend on keeping quarterbacks who have that great athletic ability, who have the speed, and who can also throw, who have the arm, and have the athletic ability to run the option, keeping them in those positions, not converting them. My alma mater wanted to recruit RG3 out of Copper's Cove, but they wanted to make him a defensive back. Art Briles was the only one who wanted to recruit him as a quarterback, and we're fortunate that he did. Otherwise, we never would have gotten to see him. I'm sure the Redskin fans in D.C. are very glad that RG3 followed Art Briles from University of Houston to Baylor, and that he stuck with him because Briles believed in him as a quarterback, and we all got to enjoy the benefits of that this past season. It was really fun watching him, run their offense and be the threat that he was at the NFL level.
Okay, let me put my coach's hat on here for a second. Okay, I may have to squeeze it over my big head. Yeah, okay, there we go. Let me ask this question. From a coach's point of view, if I'm running I-formation option, if I'm running split back veer, maybe I'm not running the option at all, why should I buy this book?
Well, I think it's hopefully would gain an advantage, would be able to run a series of plays that opposing defenses maybe don't see that often. In the I-bone formation, because it looks so similar to a power I, when you first line up in it, the defense might expect a power play that you're going to run the tailback off tackle. And instead, you run the option out of the I formation, or maybe you run Houston veer at that defense instead. It opens up a lot of different possibilities because you can run the different options out of that formation, and it's hard to tell just by looking at the formation what play will be coming. You really, as a defense, if you're trying to defend against this play until the ball is snapped and you see the quarterback's first steps, you don't know what type of play is coming next. So the appeal in the I-bone would be just the versatility. And for a coach who isn't running option, it might be just to maybe run some misdirection out of it or have a new wrinkle. If they're running regular I formation, just toss sweep or off tackle or middle runs to the tailback, you can still do that, but maybe run it off a Houston veer, misdirection. Maybe you run the tailback counter off the Houston veer play action. So it would just open up some possibilities for coaches that maybe they hadn't considered before. You don't necessarily have to run, the true triple option out of it. You can run the double option out of the formation if you're not used to running option, if your quarterback hasn't run the option before. So it would be, I think the appeal of it would be that, it's something new and different, or something renewed and different, but that would give a coach a new wrinkle to add, something else to give opponents, that force the opponents to try and prepare for that they previously hadn't had to worry about before.
Is this book written in a language I can understand?
Yes. We basically, when I wrote the first draft of the manuscript, it was basically patterned after the coaching books and articles that I had researched on the option over a number of years, or probably over the first 5 years that Dr. Smith and I were trying to develop the I-bone and put it into a package and a form that coaches would be able to use. So it's very much written, in that style, the way coaches should be able to understand it. In addition, when the editing staff over at Coach's Choice made a number of edits to the manuscript to make it a little more readable, make it more kind of user-friendly, maybe used for a few more contractions and things like that were previously not in there to make the book read and put it more in a language that coaches would be able to easily understand.
What is the title of this book if I go over at a Coach's Choice table right now? Let's say I go down to Atlanta, I go to Charlotte, I go to Boston, I go to Anaheim, and I go to the Coach's Choice table. What is the name of this book?
The title of the book is Coaching the I-Bone Option Attack Offense. That was actually a change from the original title. Dr. Smith, I guess, being a little biased since this was his brainchild, he always referred to the I-Bone as the ultimate concept in option football. But I think that was maybe a little braggadocio on his part. But this title was the title that the editors at Coach's Choice had suggested, and I was more than happy, to go with them, but defer to their judgment on this because they've been marketing to books to the coaching profession for some time now, and have quite a few books and DVDs, not only on football but a number of other sports.
Joey Lozano has been my guest. He is a journalist publicist down in Austin, Texas. He's been talking about a book he co-wrote with Dr. James Smith, who passed away back in December 2001. The book is Coaching the I-Bone Option Attack, right now, currently with Coach's Choice. Go check it out at a Coach's Choice table near you when you go to the clinics here this year. Mr. Lozano, thank you for being on the Mesh Point.
Yeah, thank you, John. Appreciate you having me on the show.
Folks, it's been great to have another Mesh Point with you. We will see you next month with another one. I have no idea who we're going to have, but I'm sure it's going to be fun because they all are. And once again, thank you for joining OptionCentral.net. And once again, we will talk to you all later. For Joey Lozano, I'm John Anderson. You folks have a great weekend.
This is the CompuSports Radio Network.